Hello, everybody. Welcome back to
another episode
of
Oneganos Ona Kahadengyo.
Water is Life.
Yes,
Oneganos. It's Oneganos. Okay, I think that is our intro video. So welcome back, everybody. This is Indigenous Let's Talk Water, episode 2 of a 7 series podcast. I'm happy to introduce our guest today, but since I don't know if all our viewers are new, so my name's Makasa Looking Horse. Sego Seguego, Makashin Yats, Ginekahaganu Gohunjoda, Dahnu Lakota, Wakatahuni, Six Nations Nidhi. And this is my co-host Dexter.
What's up? Just kidding. Scan out. Y'all was scan out. So great. It's good to see you guys again. Tanadakwa niya gyaji. Diwasa gaye niwago siyagi. O taihyoni niwage se then gayon gwan ga niwago hwanjo then gaye ohade tagi then. Hello everybody. Tanadakwa is what I'm called. I'm 24. Wolf Clan and Cayuga Nation from Six Nations, and I live on 4th Line. Me and my gram.
Yeah, and I'm also from Six Nations. I'm Mohawk and Lakota. I've done a lot of activist or water protection work in here in Six Nations and with the Water Project, working on Six Nations water. And that's our whole page, or who I'm working for, and who runs this page is for the Water Project that is here in Six Nations. And today we have awesome youth who have done amazing work within their short time here on Earth, and they made so many huge changes, and they're really helping the communities in a really important way. And we have Nidhi from, she works for United Nations University, and she's going to be talking with us after our youth guest who will be talking. So what's really exciting is that Akiš'a has a song that he would like to share with us. And maybe he can tell us a little bit about the song that he's going to share. Akiš'a?
Akiš'a makapi, the koya Akiš'a tayade me. Kokno heche mata. Odon ki makata uhinda pewachin. Relatives, I'm gonna sing a song that was composed by my dad. He sang it, and it talks about the earth and cherish and take pity on us and keep. It's like a feeling you get when maybe you see the geese coming back during springtime or anything like that. It's a feeling you get of being thankful for the earth. And yeah, I'll sing it. Oh, Chimakaya, oh, Chimakaya,
Nyawe. It's good to start off with good minds and share the song. Yeah, thank you so much for singing. It really reminds me of my second home in South Dakota. Since I'm not allowed to go there this summer, I really miss it. And sun dancing and visiting with my ate, my dad, and my relatives out there. So Nyawe. So our first speaker is Quannah, Chasing Horse, and she is from Alaska, and she's super cool, and she does a lot of land work and water work to protect the earth, and really just try to protect our way of life. So we don't really like to put any kind of activist titles on us, because it's really just trying to cater to, or like trying to be Ongwehoe or Indigenous to our lands. So Quannah, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Shojik Quannah, Chasing Horse, Ojri, Gwich'in in Lakota Sioux, Eagle Village, AK, Alaska, and Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. I'm 18, and I'm the head chair of the Gwich'in Youth Council. You know, I really like what you had to say, Makasa, about the activist word. For some reason, ever since I started doing this work, it's always been on my mind a lot, being labeled as an activist. And for me, it was more of just more of protecting my ways of life, protecting the future generations to come. It's all about the future generations and being able to keep living our ways of life without having to fear the dangers and the threats that come with it. So yeah, I'm 18. I just turned 18, so I'm able to vote this year. Since I live in the United States, I would love to freaking vote this year. Yeah, so as soon as I joined the Gwich'in Youth Council, which is very new, it's a new thing. It just started last year. It's actually coming up on 1 year of being a part of the youth council, and they asked me to share my stories, to share my ways of life and educate those who don't really understand who we are as a people. And a lot of people don't even know about Alaska Natives. We're so far away from the rest of the world. We're way far up north and everyone's more down south. And I feel like a lot of our nations aren't getting enough, I wouldn't say attention, but just getting enough media, you know, following what we're doing up here. So back maybe in September of last year, I got to go to Congress and I spoke on behalf of my Gwich'in people on a bill called the HR 1146 bill, and it was passed in the House of Representatives, and we're still waiting for it to get passed in the Senate. So this bill was to protect our sacred lands. Our people called it the sacred place where life begins. As Gwich'in people, the border in Canada, in Alaska, it split our Gwich'in people. So I have a lot of family in Canada as well as Alaska. It's really hard for me to go see them. And, you know, it's really hard for me to learn more when I want to learn more one half of my people are in Canada. But, you know, we were called the Caribou people. We followed the Caribou, and we always stayed away from the sacred place where life begins, because we respected our Caribou, and we said, you know, this is a place we don't want to interfere with, because it's the one and only place in Alaska that the Caribou go to birth their calves. Not only that, but it's the only place they are safe to birth their calves. We have a lot of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes can kill a baby calf, along with many other threats. So that is the one place that they go to. And it's really sad to say, but a lot of our native corporations here in Alaska are funding some of the oil industries. And that's one thing that we've been fighting for a really long time. I am the fourth generation of women fighting for this cause. And me being in the Capitol, speaking with representatives, speaking with senators, meeting all these people was a really big thing for us, because we have never gotten to use our voice the way we have wanted in the past. And finally, for many, many years of just fighting for this bill to protect our lands, it had been passed. And that all ties into, you know, obviously the oil and gas industry, climate change. You know, Alaska is thawing twice the rate anywhere else in the world. I see it every time I go hunting. Every year, the ground is softer. Areas that are not frozen anymore when they were frozen for thousands of years. There's a lot of permafrost melting. And so a lot of the villages along the coast, like the Eskimo villages, the Inupiaq villages, they are all having to evacuate some of their own hometowns and from their ancestral lands because of climate change. Literally, their communities are collapsing into the ground due to climate change. And so that was my big thing too, was, you know, the oil and gas industry are a huge contributor to that. And we have the pipeline here in Alaska, and it's really hard for our Native men to get jobs. And that's one job they always turn to, is the oil and gas industry, because they offer a lot of money, and they pay the villages, or the Eskimos and the Inupiaqs a lot of money to be able to drill in their lands. And we think it's really, really sad. And that's one thing that we've been trying to keep out of our lands, is the whole oil and gas industry. So that's one thing that I've been really fighting for, which ties into climate change and our way of life. But, you know, we're the man camps for these oil industries. When they have these man camps up, it puts a lot of Native women in danger in the surrounding communities. It's really sad where they place these man camps, you know, just like how it is with environmental racism. They set them in places where it's really impactful on Indigenous people, especially our women. A lot of our women are victimized, and including our land. Not only is it the land, but it's our bodies. So
they set them
yeah.
up around Indigenous communities. They purposely set them around Indigenous communities.
They don't want it anywhere else. They don't want it they don't want all that gas and oil. They don't want that around their own communities. They would rather have it, you know, there with those people. And it's really hard, you know, because I've had a lot of family members and having horrid stories, and some of our Native men would come back and not want to work for these companies and industries anymore, because they see how much it's affecting our earth. They see it firsthand. One of my mom's friends came home and said, we had a spill, and they keep a lot of these spills secret. They don't blast it anywhere. So half the time we don't know if there's a spill, because they keep it secret. And if one little hole, one tiny hole is punctured in our pipeline, it sprays hundreds of meters across our land, and it completely destroys a whole area of our land, miles and miles of our land. So they to keep those quiet, they hire more people to come in and clean it up when there's, of course, still residue from the horrible cleanup that they do.
And it contaminates everything that touches, from the water to the land and the insects and
the animals, everything. And it's so sad because you can even smell it when you breathe it. It's toxic. So, you know, when I was in DC and I finally got the opportunity to use my voice, I took it. I was like, you know, we cannot have this anymore. This is not who we are as a people. You know, a lot of people need more awareness of these issues. It's happening everywhere. Not only is it happening in Alaska, but it's happening all down in the lower 48, even in Canada. So, you know, I think it's really important for youth, especially these days, to stay woke on what's happening, because, you know, the more we know about it, the more we can do about it. The more we talk about it, the more change there is. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any like direct ways of how climate change has impacted your way of life?
So for us, we have been noticing a lot of bugs, a lot of animals we have never had up here before. We've even seen some wild cats like Krugers and stuff we've never seen up here before. And our caribou, you know, is our animal. We are caribou people, and we are seeing ticks on caribou, and we don't have ticks up here. We are seeing these insects that could kill. And also, you know, our animals here, they adapt easier to the cold because it's normally freezing up here. Even during this time, it starts cooling off. And it's not like that anymore. This last winter was the coolest winter we have had in many, many years. And that was one thing that I was really happy about. And I think it was mainly because of COVID. You know, there wasn't as many flying, not, you know, all the CO2 in the air. It's not out. It wasn't as bad as the couple years before. So that's one thing I'm grateful for, is getting to have a cooler summer. I mean, winter, not summer. But yeah, that's definitely, you know, seeing climate change in my way of life has a lot to do with the animals and the bugs, because you know, if a new bug comes up here and our animals aren't familiar with it, they can't adapt to it like that. It takes thousands and thousands of years for our animals to adapt to these climates, to these bugs. You know, any new change that happens, it takes thousands of years to adapt. So once they can't adapt that fast, they are just straight up harmed from it. It either kills them or it just hurts them. Or our meat and our fish we can't eat because they either have parasites, they're infected, they're sick, or they're just dying. So in climate change too, I'm seeing in the water around some of our villages, we're getting just straight up dead fish. And usually they make us wait. So we have Fish and Game up here, and they don't open up. They only open up certain times, and you have to have either certain nets or certain rifles you can shoot them with. And it's really hard to stay within the rules and regulations. It's really hard for Native people to keep living their ways of life, like hunting and fishing, because you know, we're not getting fish like we used to because they're dying, because the water is too warm and they're getting heart attacks and just dying. Or we have new parasites in the water, infected salmon. We're getting a lot of that. And, you know, once we usually would get, let's say 60 salmon a day, and now we only get like 10. And once we pull them out, we could only eat like 4 of them, because either the meat is bad, or they're sick, or they're already dead. And it's really sad, because it's affecting a lot of our people. A lot of our people in the rural villages way far out in Alaska, they don't have the money to come into town all the time. It's expensive to fly in and out of villages because it's on little bush planes. It's like $300 a ticket in and out, and you can't always drive in and out of these villages. Some of them you can only reach by boat or by a plane. And so it's expensive to live out in the rural area, because you don't have access to a store, you don't have access to a vehicle, and you don't have access to the city where you can provide for yourself. provide. But our people are really struggling right now because we depend on our way of life still. We depend on fishing still. We depend on hunting still. And when we're not able to do that the way we usually did before, it's really harmful. And a lot of our people are really suffering, especially in the rural areas, and especially our water too. We have glaciers, a ton of glaciers up here, and they're all melting really, really fast, which is causing certain rivers to be extremely rapid and is draining out other rivers. So it's just a matter of time before certain rivers are completely dried up and other ones are just way too full. You know what I mean? It's a mess.
That's
but
pretty
we're working
interesting
on that.
That you say things, because in our way of life, we have these prophecies, as you know, what we've come to know them as, and a lot of them have to do with the land change and our different types of sustenance, like our food, water, and our animals. And what they had said is that things are going to change. You're going to start seeing less and less. And like what we've come to now realize is that they're biological indicators of climate change and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that come before us, you know, they were so amazingly, you know, like in tune and inept with the environment that they were practically able to predict all of this that was going to happen, because they knew like one of the first omens, like you said, bugs, right? They changed the landscape, which for us was the honeybee, because we have, I think like 7 or 8 different types of bees that are actually native to around here. And so like when the honeybee comes, it actually changes the entire landscape like drastically. It'll change the different pollinators and the different types of medicines that used to grow here. And we always knew as a biological indicator that times are going to change, and we're going to see a drastic change from our regular fauna and flora, and we were going to lose a lot of that stuff. So they actually realized it was like a time of sadness when they would see bees like that. So it's pretty interesting that you say stuff like that, because through like all my like studying and my research, it's like exactly the same way, like the way you're telling it, is that had happened to us a long time ago. So I understand that, you know.
Yes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing with the Gwich'in youth group? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Gwich'in. So for us, it's more of just uplifting youth voices. And since me being head chair, you know, it's been a lot trickier getting things done due to COVID, because now they're banning travel in and out of the villages because a lot of our elders and our babies are getting sick. But right now, and in the past, we have been traveling to places. After I went to DC, I went with my Gwich'in Youth Council, and I went to New York. So they took me to New York because we had just, you know, passed that bill to protect our lands, but it's not permanent protection. It's just for a certain amount of time, and for, you know, how long or how much money they're willing to put in to keep going with the process of drilling. So, so they had me traveling a lot, speaking. And I went to New York, and I had spoken to a lot of banks and financial institutes that were financially supporting all of these industries, the oil and gas industry. And so I would go in these meetings with the CEOs of these industries and have these conversations with them, telling them why it's so important, why we don't want them to fund these oil and gas industries. So it took a while, and you know, there were a lot of them that were for it. They were like, no, we're gonna drill, like we're gonna support them, but you know, we'll hear what you have to say. And after I'd gone in there, I would be surprised of like the mindsets of these people, because you know, for me being there, it's me educating them, because they don't know what it's like. They don't live here, they don't know our people. And so me, it's just really educating them, trying to get them to understand why it's so important for us and why we are suffering because of the choices they are making. You know, to them it's just like whatever, but it's a lot bigger for us. And, you know, trying to get them to understand that was really hard. So I went traveling to many different places. I went to Denver on behalf of my Gwich'in Youth Council, but also personal work. So the North Face had, I would say, not really funded, but they support me and my mom in the work that we do. She works for Native Movement here in Fairbanks, Alaska, and she organizes and works with a lot of like, let's say, grassroots organizations that help fund local Native, we can say like Native artists or people that are trying to make a change. So Native Movement also was supporting me in this, and they have been working really hard on the same issues. So the Gwich'in Steering Committee is what put together the Gwich'in Youth Council, and Native Movement and the Gwich'in Steering Committee work closely together on these issues. And so I went to Denver and I got to speak at an OR. So it was for the outdoor industry. It's where all of the outdoor industry companies come together and they show all of their retailers and stuff, you know, their new products, like what the upcoming line is for whatever. But for me, my job there was that the North Face was coming together and supporting a lot of Indigenous people on uplifting their voices and sharing and educating people that don't know what's going on, you know, looking at a bigger picture. So I got to go there, and they had put together a whole panel surrounding me and my mom, and they are now funding a short film on me and my mom for the North Face. So they took me there, and I got to meet a lot of really cool people. I have been at and spoken at a lot of really different cool rallies. And I think, you know, I couldn't hear you. What you say? Yeah.
I'm glad your work is supported.
Yeah, that's the thing. It happened in such a short time. I was really surprised. You know, I was like, wow, people really care what I have to say. And, you know, so the Patagonia too, as well, they have been supporting Gwich'in people for a long time, and they were a big help with passing the bill. So, you know, having these supporters is really important. But I think, you know, what I'm really grateful for is just having a platform to use my voice. That's one thing that I'm really happy for, is because not a lot of our youth get the opportunity. And, you know, when a Native youth has the opportunity, you have to take it. There's not a lot of representation out there for us. And, you know, just being educated and staying woke and knowing what's going on and speaking up is what's like really important to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I encourage youth in my community to use their voice, because they'll be supported, and you just have to have that passion, keep going, and people will notice and want to support you. And that's what happened when I wanted to fight against Nestle, or like I just had to keep my head up and just keep going, and people will support you if your heart is in the right place. So yeah. It's like it's definitely, I encourage youth to use their voice, definitely.
Because there's only one you, so you got to make it count. There's never going to be another one like you. I have a question for you too. What are the significances of your tattoos?
So traditionally, a lot of you know, a lot of Indigenous people all over the world practiced traditional tattooing, and for us it was to use a little bone to stick and poke it. And our people, you know, due to residential schools and stuff, we lost a lot of that, including our languages and our ways of life and our tattooing. It's so when a girl becomes a woman, so it's like coming of age, we have like I would say like a ceremony around it. My mom, she had been educating herself a lot on our traditional practices, and when from a young age, from like 5th grade, she always told me about, you know, our tattooing. And she told me, when you are old enough and when you are comfortable enough, I want you to get this tattoo, because you will be the first young woman to get it in over a century. And it will start bringing back a lot of our traditional ways. And so the more I learned about it and the more I looked into it and learned how important it was to our people, it's like a identity of who we are. So the first one is becoming a woman. And so once you get the tattoo, you start learning and taking on the responsibilities to be that woman. And it also is like significance of being able, once you're a woman, you are able to get married and have kids now. So I'm a woman. I'm not married yet, but I can have kids. The second one could be marriage. The third one can be childbirth. It really depends on what you want to tell your story as. It could be, you can add like dots and stuff for past people, you know, people in your life, really important people in your life that have passed before. It's just really your story. And the ones on my eyes, they just, for us, you can either do arrows. I decided to do the dots. It's just to keep me focused on my goals in life, what's really important and who I am as a person. So just keeping my eyes straight and forward, keep going forward, and don't look back.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think that a lot of people I mean, I know a few, maybe 2 like tattoo artists who are trying to do the same thing, because we also have coming of age ceremonies and we also have tattooing in our culture. So I think we're trying to revitalize that too. So I'd like to introduce our second youth here, and his name's Akiš'a Peters. He's from South Dakota, and he's Dakota. Yeah, and if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit, Akiš'a.
Again, I'll do my introduction. I'll do the full length. Akiš'a Makiapi. They call me Akiš'a. It means war cry. But my Dakota name, Dakota Hukshida Tanya, my Dakota name is Boy Appears. And Atewa Mike Peters Ichiapi, Tashunkazi Dakota. My dad's name's Mike Peters. He's Makasha's adopted brother in the Indian way. And his Indian name is Yellow Horse. But so I got introduced to these guys, came over to Canada, 6 Nations, and had a great time, you know, and I didn't even expect to go, but I went there and I spoke my language, and people started to, they thought that was cool, so I guess they invited me to come on this Zoom call. Any specific questions?
Yeah, it's awesome that you're trying to revitalize your language, because we're also trying to do that a lot here. And when you and your dad talk, you can talk pretty much fluently, right?
Oh, well,
just the
from the outside looking in, I'm pretty good at it, but based on what I think about it, I feel like I only know a little of what there is. So for my age, I'm pretty good at it. I could speak with elders and my uncles and my dad, but based on where I want to get, I'm not close yet. I just got to keep learning and learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my dad's pretty up there in the spectrum of language.
I was real I was real proud because I made him laugh for using the language, and I remember that forever.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so I have like a question for you. And so do you want to just say about like the work that you do to revitalize the language there in South Dakota? So like use it and what helps people, or like, yeah.
Okay, so ever since I was little, I would hear my kunshi, my grandma, and her sisters talking in Dakota, and it never threw me off guard or anything. It just felt normal hearing that. But as I got older, I started to hear it less and less, and especially among my peers, because when we were little kids, everyone was trying to learn. But as I got older, people just had different interests, and I really started to notice. It really started fading away, and that kind of scared me. So I started talking with my uncles and my elders, and I was kind of getting scared for the language, and everybody else was. But then the generation before me, all my like big brothers and cousins that I look up to, they all started learning the language, and they all got really good at it. And one of them, my Tahashi, my cousin Joey Bird, he one summer he came and he picked me up and he took me to the tribal college, and he had me sign some papers, and he had me sign up to be a language learner. So every day all summer he'd pick me up and we'd just go fishing, go chop wood, but everything would be in the language. And I did that for a whole summer, and by the end I was pretty good. And then that following spring he hired me on again as an apprentice, a Dakota language apprentice. And then I started doing more work with papers and writing things, translating, and just adding to my skills. And then I was contacted by our tribe, who wanted me to, our tribal language institute had asked me to start making little video clips to try and maybe get some more youth interested in the language. And one thing that really inspired me was so I went with my uncle Jeremy Reddick. We went to this arrow making little workshop they had at one of the district centers, and it was a man from I'm pretty sure he was from Porcupine, if I remember correctly, and he had two daughters there, probably 7, one was 5 maybe, but they were both fluent. They knew Lakota. They could talk to each other, and they're better than I am, and that made me so proud to know that there's still people like that. And another thing we've been trying to do over here is we're traditionally getting a lot of our things back, like the way we make things. Recently made a bow, arrows, scraped a hide, and made drums before. But overall, we're just trying to regain everything we lost during all the turmoil and the generational trauma, the boarding schools, everything that's gone. We're slowly trying to bring it back, and it's really starting to pick up here.
That's awesome. And one of the tools that you use or that helps the youth is lacrosse. And because your dad stayed with us here in Six Nations a lot, he really liked lacrosse, and he'd always go to lacrosse games. And I guess did he have a dream, or he just wanted to bring it back to, well, that's what my mom said. I don't know if that's true or not, but he wanted to bring it back to the youth in South Dakota, and now you use it. Now do you use the language when you play lacrosse?
So
or the language when you play football?
So
oh no.
Okay, is it good now? Oh yeah. So in about 3 or 4 years ago, that same uncle I was talking about, Jeremy Redigo, he moved back to our res from Montana, and he started really learning about lacrosse. And then he was talking to my dad and my other uncles, and we started getting it rolling. And here, I'll keep this story short, but we ended up just our little housing, probably less than 200 people live there. We had got a team going, and we named our team Susbecha, as the dragonfly. It could dodge all over and move in any direction. It's really mobile, so that's what we named our team. And he went all the way to state. We won the state championship game in 2014, and it was really a big deal for all us kids, because we never realized we could do something like that. Especially because lacrosse, especially around here, is only for more privileged people, because they have to buy all the equipment. And we just got whatever we could get, donations, anything. We're just a little team of res kids, didn't even have one sub, and we went over there and took it, and we called our plays in Dakota, and we used the language and teachings. There's some other things that happened that weren't too good, kind of racist stuff, but probably get into that another time. With football, it goes more in depth because we can call plays specifically in Dakota. Like, so in football, you could say flood right, and and if you said it in English, the other team could know what you're talking about and disrupt the play and just mess everything up. But since we talk a different language, Dakota, we could say Mni Tapa, and that's still flood right, but they don't know that, we do. And so it makes it easier on us and more confusing for them. And all of our plays we say in Dakota.
That's awesome. And that's huge. Like, that's a big thing, I think. That's
a big advantage.
Yeah. And it would be super cool if, like, any of our teams here would do that because I mean, there's in any kind of sport, like, you have plays, and whether it's lacrosse or hockey or football.
It's a great tool just to get to learn the language. You know, it's like using that little bit that you know, you can just keep elaborating on it. So that's pretty cool. That's the way to get the youth involved in language, is just keeping those little plays, and you say, you know, this is an advantage over what you got, because you got this language that they don't have, they can't understand it. You know, that's the way they won that war. The code talkers, how they won that war is the same way, and they had an advantage. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's good to hear that lacrosse is way coast to coast now too, because I know right now there's a situation with our Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Nationals. They're not allowing them to participate in the Olympics because they don't recognize our sovereignty. They don't recognize our country, basically. So we're having this big litigation and legal fights, these battles now. But we're getting more and more traction from outside influences, more so than just Paul Rabel. You know, even though he has his what they call it, the PLL now, Professional Lacrosse League on NBC. So that's who we're really trying to get. Like a really good, he'd be like a really good platform to utilize. We could use his platform on NBC and get our message like out across the entire nation to not just Ongwahome people, but to, you know, non-Ongwahome as well. Like, everybody will know, and they can realize, you know, that lacrosse is our game. And like you said, only the privileged kids really get all the equipment, but back here, like, all you need is a stick and you're ready to play. The only thing that matters is if you can catch, you can pass, and if you can run.
Yeah, it's definitely really messed up because lacrosse is right in our creation story. And talking about creation stories, we wanted to know, there's a lot of coverage of Mount Rushmore. I wanted to know if you could tell us about why the landscape there is sacred.
Okay, so I'm Dakota, which is the eastern side of what used to be our territory, and Black Hills is more in the Lakota side, but we're all one people. And I know enough about it to probably spread awareness or whatever I need to do. So Black Hills, long time ago, in our creation story, that's where they say we came out as Grandpa Bridget said, we came out as little buffalo, little mice with buffalo horns, and we came out of that cave, Wind Cave, they call it, in the Black Hills, and then half of us turned into buffalo and half of us turned into man. That's why we love the buffalo so much. And there's a lot of different stories, tons of stories, but pretty much they all go back to the Black Hills. And some people say we came out when we came from the Black Hills and came out Minnesota area. Then when the Lakota went back, they're just going back to where we originated from, because we're some people say nomadic, but that wasn't really the not really the term we like to use because it's kind of insinuating that we weren't very intelligent, but everything we did was in a circle. And so when they say the Lakota went back to the Black Hills and took it from other tribes, well, we were just coming back around that way. And when they conquered us, after all the wars were over, on a side note, we fought for 47 years. That's, I believe, 12 times longer than World War II. It was constant battles from Minnesota all the way to the Black Hills. And they finally killed so many people, and we were starting to surrender. Then they finally gave us the Black Hills as a big giant reservation. But then they found gold there, and so they took that too. And we were dispersed all over South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, even Canada. And what they did was they went in those Black Hills and they destroyed a sacred site. Itancha Shakpe is 6 grandfathers, 6 great big stone faces on that mountain, and they blew them up and carved faces of our enemies there. After they defeated us, they blew up our sacred site and carved the people who were monsters in our point of view right on our sacred site. Personally, Abraham Lincoln, he's personally responsible for signing an executive order to hang one of my unkas, my grandpas. His name was Gwich'in. He was one of the 38+2 chiefs that were hanged in Minnesota. The correct term is hanged, but hung sounds like it flows better. And I remember in school, I didn't know how to feel about that. Because everybody says Abraham Lincoln was this great guy, but me and my classmates, we didn't know how to feel about that because he killed our grandpas. He was the commander-in-chief of the United States Army who wiped out our people. So we still have to learn about that, and every time you think of South Dakota license plates, he's on there. And we have to see that all the time, and it's hurtful to us. And when they did that rally over there was protests and things like that, and that's why, because those men who are on those big stone faces, they're no good to us. We don't acknowledge them. That's one of our sacred sites that was destroyed and twisted, and that's why it was really impactful for us that people started to notice that and take sort of action to try and spread awareness that Mount Rushmore is real important to us. Black Hills are important to us. And one last thing is the Sioux Nation is one of the poorest nations in the entire North American continent. We're some of the poorest places, and actually Pine Ridge, I believe, is the poorest place in America, and most reservations are. One of our towns here, Sisseton, is in the top 10 lowest total income or average incomes in the country. And for the Black Hills, when they took it, they paid us, but we never took that money. And so we're still the poorest people, but I believe we have $7.5 billion sitting in a bank somewhere for us to take, but we're never going to take it because those hills aren't for sale.
Yeah, and I think right there, like, explains of how strong we believe that the land can never be for sale. No matter, you can't ever put a price on it, no matter how big. Definitely. And yeah, my brother and I went on the Dakota 38+2 ride, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done besides sun dancing. It's and that's like on a horse, like from the morning till dusk all day for like a week and a half or something. And it's like totally hard on your body. Definitely one of the hardest things I would have done in my life. But yeah, that happens every single year. That happens every year. And a lot of people don't know about that because it doesn't ever have media coverage. None of the rides really have any kind of national media coverage like I think that they should deserve. Since we are we're only gonna let's talk about water. Do you have any water stories you would like to share?
Yeah, I have one I'd like to start out with is this is what one of the elders was talking about, and my dad learned it from them, and I learned it from my dad. So whenever you see water, whenever it's moving, it's clean. You can use it to wash yourself. But if you see water like in a bog or a puddle that's stagnant, you can't use it for anything really. Things start to grow in there that aren't good, and parasites and things. You can't drink it. And it's the same with our bodies too. If you don't cry, if you don't sweat, your water inside your body becomes stagnant, and things start to spiritually and on different levels, even mentally, you start having things that you don't need that are bad for you. And that's as Dakota people, or our teachings, you always can cry if you need to, and you always need to be doing something, getting that water moving. And kind of relating to that, our drum, the big round drum that you probably see in movies, anything, it's real sacred to us, and it comes from the water and also from a woman. So a long time ago, there's a position in any tribe, any band of Dakota or Lakota, they'd communicate with each other. To communicate with each other, they'd have messengers, and the messenger would be the tallest, strongest, most fit person. And they'd always be having their water going good because they're always active. And so they're real strong, real powerful. Everyone respected them. And a long time ago, this girl, she really wanted to become that because she always looked up to those messengers. And it was almost always a man. And it wasn't because they didn't choose it. It was just whoever the best athlete was in the whole village. And so she made that her goal. So whenever someone would tell her to go get water, she'd run down to the creek, come back. Run down to the spring, come back. Fast as she could. And by the time she was a young woman, she could beat anyone in the whole village except that current messenger. And so she challenged him to a race. And the parameters were if she won, she'd be the new messenger. And so they ended up racing, and she beat that man. And so the elders and everybody talked about it, and they appointed her the new messenger, and everybody's real happy. Even that man who got beat, he was happy too, because it wasn't about ego. It was about who the best person for the job was to communicate with the other villages. And so her first village was actually, or her first mission, I don't know if you'd call it that, her job was to come from here, Enemy Swim, or Wapton area, and go to Lower Brule, which is Gwich'in, Lakota. So the Dakota girl ran all the way for 4 days to Lakota country, and she got there, and everybody was so surprised it was a woman. And when she got there, that messenger over there, he was really checking her out, and she was checking him out, and they liked each other, but they had so much respect for each other, they didn't say anything. And that night, they're talking, and she got her message. She brought the message, everything she needed to tell them, and she had to leave in the morning, first thing in the morning. And what happened was that boy, he just couldn't stop thinking about her all night, and so his plan was in the morning he was gonna go with her, go talk to her. But here, since he stayed up all night thinking about her, by the time sun came up, she was already gone. So him and his friends, they started chasing after her to go tell her how he feels. And she was running way ahead, but she looked back and she seen a dust cloud, and she didn't know who it was. She just saw a group of people chasing her. So she was scared, and she kept running for 3 days. Actually, she made it faster the second time. And here she's so exhausted, picking berries on the run, things like that in her satchel. And that guy and his friends, he was so confused why she kept running, but it was already too far to turn back, so he just kept going after her. And they're running like that, and she got to this lake about a couple miles over here, and she dove in, and she got a cattail, and she was using it to breathe the air. And that boy, he was trying to find her, but she didn't know who it was, an enemy. So she was just sitting in there breathing that through that cattail. And she did that for 4 days, and finally that boy gave up. But and he went back. But I don't know if she ever knew this till way later, but while she was under there for 4 days, she had a vision of a drum, a hide drum. It was a tree stump and a hide around it. And so when she came out of that water, she made that drum, and that's how our people got the drum. It comes from the woman and the water. And so water is really important to us, especially teachings that about like keeping it stagnant or letting it come out. Really, anything we do, it involves water. That's why Niwi Choni, water is life. Ni Kimi Choni, water is life. It's real important to us. It's in our prayers. It's in our songs. We can't do anything without water. And yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that story. It's definitely really important, like refreshing to hear other people's stories of different nations. And remind us.
It's pretty similar to our stories.
Yeah.
We have our own type of drum too, but it actually utilizes water. It's a water drum, and it's made from there's a lot of different trees. Like there used to be chestnut trees that was a big a part of the forest at one time because it was so large, and they provided so much sustenance from the chestnuts that there used to be at least 3.5 feet of fallen organic matter and all these different types of fruits from trees. So like the hickory, oak, chestnut, and stuff like that. That there was 3.5 feet on the ground. You couldn't even see the bottom. But we would use those trees like mainly like a hickory tree, one about like this size. It's like more of like a hand drum, and you would hollow it out, put a wooden bottom in there, and you would have a hole on the side there, and you would put water inside and put a plug onto it, and then you would stretch out leather or like a hide around top of it, and you would put a ring around it to stretch it, and then you would wet the skin, and you would carve up a little drumstick, and we would use that, and it sort of carries like a resonating tone, like a ping. It just goes like, sounds really good. But that's our water drum, and we utilize that basically almost every single song that we use. There's only a few there that don't use the water drum, but we always sing on behalf of the women, because women already do so much. They're already taking care of everything, so we sing for them. We sing on behalf of them. It's not anything like some people get it misconstrued, like women can't sing. No, there's a specific time that women can sing. It's just that they have so much power already in them that they use their voices for very special reasons. So nowadays people are like, oh, why don't you let them sing? It's like, well, they do have a time to sing. It's just not right now. We sing for them. Yeah, but still, it's almost the same exact way. We have a drum. We use it for the same reasons. More so than just to for ceremonies and to take care of things like that. It's to celebrate life, and that's a lot of reasons. When I was taught to growing up, to sing, you sing upwards because you're singing to the Creator, because you're projecting it to Him that you're grateful to be alive still. And when you dance too, my great uncle always said, he's like, I always look for the people that keep their head up when they sing, and sing and dance, because they're the ones that are grateful to be alive. Yeah, so yeah, for that story though, that was pretty good one.
Yeah. So, we actually have, speaking of water rights and land rights, we have
climate change
and
biodiversity and human rights,
all of the above. We have Nidhi, and she's from the United Nations University, which is located close to us, and she's on this water project, and she's been such a huge help into getting things going, and she does awesome work, and she goes to different. She travels like the world, and she's pretty fearless. So here is Nidhi, and you can introduce yourself a little bit and the work you do.
Thank you, Makasa. That was very kind of you. Thanks for the kind words. My name is Nidhi Nagabhatla. I work for United Nations University. We are hosted with McMaster around as an arrangement with the Canadian government. And as an institute, we serve as the think tank on water for United Nations. So we produce knowledge. We also influence policies. We prepare documents for UN's work related to water and sustainable development goals. And we also invest a lot in youth through our different capacity building programs. And having said that, I'm so delighted to talk to you on this forum to share, exchange, to hear, and to learn, and also to sort of share. And let me start with two small quotes that comes from our message on water. When we talk about rights, when we talk about cultural connectivities, when we talk about having everyone a part and the planning to be inclusive, the policies to be inclusive, these quotes are water for all and leaving no one behind. So I'm going to explain some narratives, some stories, share some information around these two small advocacy quotes. I can also call it activism quotes, because I think there is no harm in being that activist who can lead the way. And maybe this word got tarnished, but I think we have to re-question this word to become more substantial in driving sustainable development as we go along. And youth have a huge role to put it back in place. And we do need a lot of water activists. And I think maybe I'm not really counting myself as one, but I'm very, very happy to support whosoever is taking that lead role. And we have seen in the past meetings of the UN how Greta Thunberg has taken the call on climate change on the world stage. She's been very bold. And I think she's taken the criticism on the face, and she's kind of stood up to it and still holding the torch high on being that voice that we need, the youth voice. And I think so happy to hear more youth voices, especially from the Indigenous side, coming in and joining that whole scheme of things. Next slide, please. So as we're getting into the next slide, let me tell you something about what has happened in the past years in terms of the notions around water, climate change. There have been a lot of water crisis situations that communities are facing. And water world is a big world. Some communities face some kind of situations. Some people are facing droughts, others are facing floods. Some are facing the impact of climate extreme and water extreme events like tsunamis, hurricanes, landslides, water infrastructure like dams. Sometimes they collapse, they cause destruction, and the whole notion of unsustainable development. So as we have climate change scenarios, which you may have heard, and it's not necessary to go into the science of it, but to understand what it means for you, to contextualize it to your own understanding, to your own community, to what you can make of it. Similarly, we at UN, we identified water crisis scenarios. If you feel that it can bring you you can align it with your work, please go through this report. There is a link that's been provided. It gives you at least some numbers or some trends worldwide that you can compare, or you can derive from, or maybe you can use in your work. Next slide, please. And something which I work on closely is the human right. The before slide, please. 10 years back, the UN put a resolution. Can we have the slide on the human rights before this? 10 years back, now we're celebrating after this. Next year, in this 2020, we're celebrating 10 years of human rights, which is the next slide. Anyways, you can see that United Nations took an effort to recognize that every individual around the world should have accessible water, should have water available, and should have adequate water, good quality, enough quantity, and that is a right that should not be compromised. But when you hear the stories of water warnings, you hear water advisories, especially for Indigenous communities in Canada, you feel that much work has to be done to fulfill their human rights to water. And there are a number of barriers which we all understand, but I'm sure some of you can take those barriers as a call to take the water rights, the climate rights agenda to the forefront of policymakers. Especially, I really like the guest speaker from Atlanta talking to the policymakers at higher level, because somewhere that's where the change needs to be made, thinking needs to be developed, knowledge needs to be communicated, because people sitting there perhaps may not understand the complexities and the challenges that people on the ground are bearing. So I think this is another point to share. Take it as it fits in your own mandate. Next slide, please. Next slide is about the water security. So UN declared a water decade from 2005 to 2015, and then came up with a water security framework that encapsulates not just supplying water, but to ensuring. And there was a framework in the previous slide. There is a different slide order, so maybe I'll try to align. You can see that framework and see that it also talks about having stability in the community, having involvement of the community, having good governance. So it's not just about water delivery. The slide after this, please, it has a nice conceptual framework that talks about it. Now, at some point, you must have heard about Sustainable Development Goals. These were launched in 2015 as an agenda for 15 years till 2030 to see that whatever was not done as a global community, let's join hands, let us identify problems that communities are facing on ground, voices that were not heard before. They should also be sitting on global governance tables. And at that point, I might want to bring in Makasa to just say one or two words about her experience of the meeting at United Nations headquarters in New York, where she carried the message for the climate justice. Maybe some few words, Makasa. What was your experience there before I go further?
Yeah, I think it definitely relates to what you're talking about, that we don't have our voices, our Indigenous voices at the big tables often. Like when I was in the United Nations, or at the United Nations, for example, I was doing the opening for the United Nations environmental, or United Nations climate change, youth climate change summit, I believe. Climate week, yeah. So I did the opening, and in the opening I did a pipe ceremony, which is on my father's side. And I said there about how we need to protect our waterways because they're more important than oil. And we also need to pray about these things and as one mind and one heart. And that's why I did the pipe ceremony, because and I said that it's not something to play around with. Like, it's not a show. A pipe ceremony isn't a show. It's to really bring the minds and hearts together of all the people that in that room. And like when I did that, it was for the beginning of the climate change forum for the youth, and it was the first one ever. And and at that one, at the event, I noticed that there was no Indigenous voices representatives whatsoever. I was the only person in that room who was Native, and it was a lack of access, because after I got done talking, these youth, about 7 of them had solutions to climate change, and they didn't, none of the solutions could work in Indigenous communities because 1, we don't have basic human rights like water. 2, we don't have Wi-Fi and internet connection in a lot of the places. 3, we don't have the buildings or like the technologies that they were talking about that you would need that cost millions of dollars. So any of the solutions that they have put forth, all of them could not work in Indigenous communities. And that's why it's important that Indigenous voices that we have a place to have our voices heard, and the people who were judging were Google and like all of these people. I'm not too sure like who all, but like they're very high, but they were also not like Indigenous leaders like they should be. And to like be at the table along with everybody else. So like that was an eye-opening experience for me, because people didn't even know who Mohawk people were. And that was like a strike to me, because like this is that where New York is traditional Haudenosaunee Mohawk lands. And so that's why it was like super disconnected. And in the other room, like 10 steps in the other room, there was an Indigenous climate change summit where there was only like maybe 5 senators or state members or whatever they're called, and just like a handful of like Indigenous people, and it was very like structured. They only had a certain amount of time to speak, and when the other room had like a room full. So like that was like the disconnection of Indigenous voices around climate change and water sustainability and all of the solutions. Anything to do with climate change, I think, was very disconnected when I went.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think UN is putting an increasingly large effort to see that Indigenous voices are part of all important discussions on land management, discussions on land allocation, discussions on climate change adaptation planning. But most of it is rather in theory than in practice. So I think somewhere it has to be a sort of some small steps needs to be taken from both ends. And I see that these are small steps that you have gone and represented, but they can go a long way in inspiring number of people, youth around the world to encourage them to participate in such discussions, to not fear, to put a voice on the table, to ensure that their agenda is represented. And I think it's going to go a long way in making that transformative change of sustainable development that we all are thinking. With that, maybe let me also share very, very quickly with you the World Water Development Report in 2019. Its title was Leaving No One Behind. And there was a lot of interesting messages on including youth in not just in kind of giving the messages, but also the part of the action coming from the science, the action coming from on-ground planning, the action coming from designing resilience plans, executing them, and then taking ownership. So a sort of a big focus on that. Why was this emphasis given? Because there were some gruesome facts that came through the analysis. Look at one of these message. World's most vulnerable and also most poor people pay more for getting water than rich. And this is a really blaring fact. And there is a lot of data to support that. So this whole message this report brought to the high-level policy makers was to see that future discussions on how water should be allocated, who's going to use the water, how they are going to use the water, should all be made fair and transparent and inclusive and participatory. Next slide, please. A very quick word on the newest report from 2020, the World Water Development Report in the next slide. That focused on climate change and also took the whole agenda of water for all, exclusion, inequality, to address them, to promote engagement and equity. And these are just advocacy posters, but you'll see a specific poster was made for Indigenous people. So they are represented in all discussions. And I see that some steps have been taken by people from Africa, from Asia, New Zealand, Australia, even North America, Latin America. I do see them in meetings. I do meet them in meetings. They are given a special session. They are given a voice, but we need to do more. That's just the beginning. Next slide, please. So you see here the water, the indigenous people, water needs have been represented very clearly in the World Water Day celebrations worldwide. And they talk to all the people who have been ignored in the past and should be a voice of the future water security discussions. The new report, very quick words on that, and I will limit it to what it talks about youth. The new report is Water and Climate Change. It was launched on World Water Day 2020 on March 22nd, 2020. And it says that water resources management is an essential solution to managing climate change impacts. It also talks about how water and climate risks are connected to the human health, which is again an aspect that remains missing in climate change discourse, in water management planning discussions, diseases, deaths and injuries, and focus on mental health. And I see Dawn and you have in their own way taken this agenda on the table. You're discussing this. So I really want to congratulate and compliment on the good work that's going in investigation, these interconnections. Before I close, two statements that talks about youth. And I would like to really emphasize as I speak, youth can influence and participate directly in efforts to learn about, prevent, for, and cope with the impacts of climate change. And this would clearly influence how different interventions and planning measures related to climate change adaptation will work in future. Also, this report, I would really suggest you to have a look. All the people working on youth issues was funded by the European Commission, and it brought wonderful stories from around the world, how youth are designing an action agenda on climate change mitigation and adaptation, how they're coming up with this wonderful projects like the Youth Climate Lab. So these are some few snapshots from the work that's going on at the UN's level. I can definitely add more, but I would like to save some time for getting some questions or maybe sort of getting into a discussion. Do you have any questions to ask me?
Yeah, Quannah, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Nidhi? Because right now, Akiš'a had to leave because his phone was at 4%. So he had to leave a little bit early. But do you have any?
Not really. I think that was really straightforward, really factual. That's like one thing that's really hard to come by these days is people that are actually know what they're talking about. And that was like when I was listening like as hard as I could. My phone kept cutting out. It's been glitching, but I learned a lot actually. And I don't have any questions I can think of right now, but I just want to say thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and educating me more. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And take a note of the Water Action Decade. It was launched in 2018, just 2 years now. And it has some more years to go, 8 years. So become a part, start your own campaign, take a look at what it entails in terms of mandate and objectives. Try to make a nice discourse about it. And also this nice report that was launched in 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel for Ecosystems and Biodiversity. Biodiversity and ecosystems remain very important to the culture and identity of indigenous people, not just in Latin America, but in North America, Latin America, but in the Americas, but around the world. So this report has shown that we are losing millions of species, animal species, plant species, as you were talking about in your discourse early on. So we have to take a careful note. We're just not protecting ourselves. We also have to protect the nature that we live in, that we are a part of, and that serves us. And I think this report really emphasizes how this can't be done without involvement of indigenous people and their traditional knowledge. And I've shared that in the previous meetings with the Indigenous project, and I would really like to again flag it.
Must see.
Yeah, and so much for your knowledge. I wish I was as smart as you.
You're in the making. You're in the making. You have a fabulous mom. I'm really inspired by her. So we are in a chain. We are in a loop.
We're going to go off the chain. That's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. That was amazing. That was really good. And it's very, like as Quannah had said, it's very inspiring and refreshing to actually see somebody who cares about like real human beings, not just a prophet, but cares about the future generations to come and cares about the world that how we see it, because when we talk about the world and about all these different natural elements and nature and stuff like that, we always refer to her as our mother or in familiar terms. That's how we view a lot of our family too, like as distant relatives or extended family. That's something that we've always held close to our chest. We've had, great big families. We always are worried about who's healthy and whatnot. We always worry about our cousins. We all grew up together, and that's how we see the world and the land and all the animals and all the plants and the waters, especially. That's how we really relate to them as our family. So that's amazing to see that you're on the ground and doing the work.
That's wonderful. And I think there is always a space for alternative views. This is not a straight line development and the visions of sustainable development. It has to encompass everyone whose interests are at stake. So I would like to compliment, keep going and keep doing what you're doing. It's very important. Do not even think for a second that the voices can be ignored. We have to find a place for all voices, for all age groups, for all societies, for all communities. And that's where the mission of United Nations stands, leaving no one behind.
Thank you.
Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Yeah. So our next thing is that we're going to show a music video by Prolific the Rapper. He was at Standing Rock. I don't know if we have that, Hannah. If not, that's okay. Please work. Do.
I'm facing 7 years in prison, yet I remain dedicated to peace and prayer. Pray with us.
One family. If we don't stand, who will? On earth. The wind comes in four corners, four directions, four colors. And death rides on four horsemen. A black snake with some black tanks. How much money do these companies need to make? They could drop their product, but they wanna save a buck. Already extracted billions, when is enough enough? I used to be in the oil fields, getting paid, but I quit, cause oil water I can't drink. Look down and see Kamimi Ladai in the mud. I looked up and told myself that enough's enough. Money does not own my soul, living comfortable. It's not in my plans, my hands in the sand. Some things were more than gold. Some things they can't be sold. Some things can't be replaced. She's your mother, the fresh water is her veins. What is going on? Have we all lost our minds? Every human needs clean water to survive.
We're sorry, your call cannot be called. Martin County Sheriff's Department.
Hi, I need to report an assault.
Okay, where did it occur at?
Standing Rock. They're innocent, unarmed people being attacked with water in militia-style police firing at point-blank range with high-powered mace on unarmed people. Who protects the people?
Ma'am, yeah, if there's police there, then it has
The police are the ones attacking innocent, unarmed people. So what do we do to stop the police literally hitting people at point-blank range in the face? People can lose eyes. People are going to get hypothermia. People could die. We have elders here. We have children here. We have all ages here. Nobody is armed except for the police. Who protects the people from the police?
Well, I guess if you want to put it up the chain of command, the next person to talk to would be the governor's office.
Love is the strongest, this path is the hardest. But if we were strong enough to do it, we wouldn't see it. Our prayers would not be needed. This movement's very needed. Indigenous wisdom unheeded and sacred things depleted. I'm Mexicano, my Lakota, and I'm white too. I'm mixed with everyone, so part of me's just like you. Every group of human beings shares the same stars. And if the earth is not your mother, are you from Mars? Decline since 1492, 500 years and counting. Surviving the genocide they call colonizing my turtle island. What is a fossil fuel? Continued destruction, nothing new. Live in a system, taking our children, shipping their feelings till nothing's true. I had that money in front of me, but I left it. Cause oil money's dirty if my mother gets disrespected. We're disconnected, these times are hectic and feeling heavy. But still we love all living beings and suffer for the many. We are peaceful people, that's why we walk with prayer. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be standing here. We're peaceful people who walk with prayer. Turtle Island, have no fear. Despite what they show in the media, we're kind people, hold your ground. Change is coming now.
Ooh, that's awesome. Woo. I always love that music video. But now everybody, now Akiš'a and Quannah and Nidhi and Hannah
and everybody out there. Let's continue in the good fight.
Yeah, now
stay strong.
Keep going.
Keep your head up. Keep breathing. Keep drinking water. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Love you all.
And see you next week.
Oh yeah, that too.
Bye guys.